Nelson Mandela was, depending on who you ask, either a saint who saved South Africa or the strategist who negotiated away its soul. Born in 1918 in the Eastern Cape, imprisoned for 27 years, and released to become the country's first Black president in 1994, Mandela's story reads like a myth, too perfect to interrogate without guilt. His struggle against apartheid was monumental. Sabotage against the state, speeches in court that turned trials into platforms, and a personal life sacrificed for a vision larger than himself. Yet within this mythology lies a very big puzzle. Mandela became the global symbol of reconciliation, but in reconciling, he also compromised. South Africa avoided a bloodbath, yeah, but the economic foundations of apartheid, with land, wealth, and ownership, remained largely untouched. He won the vote, but he left the vault sealed. The paradox of Mandela is that he delivered freedom in form, but not fully in substance, forcing us to ask whether his triumph was also a carefully managed limitation. Perhaps the world wanted a savior, not a revolutionary, and Mandela obliged at a cost that is still felt today. Consider the drafting of the South African Constitution, often praised as one of the most progressive documents in the world. Rights were guaranteed, freedoms were protected, and equality was enshrined in ink. But land, the heart of South Africa's disposition, was fumbled, maybe deliberately. Property rights were fiercely guarded, and redistribution became bureaucratic rather than revolutionary. The compromise was presented as stability. No Zimbabwe style seizures, no economic collapse, just a gradual rebalancing through state mechanisms. Yet, decades later, land reform remains stalled, inequality entrenched. Here lies some uncomfortable speculation, if you will. Mandela's government inherited a broken system and chose not to break it further. That choice avoided collapse, but cemented vulnerability for millions of Black South Africans, left with political power but economic precarity. The global applause for Mandela's constitution overlooked the fact that the very soil remained in the hands of those who had seized it generations before. In prioritizing peace, Mandela left the question of land festering, a problem deferred and not solved. Mandela's leadership embodied paradox in every decision. He spoke of liberation, yet enforced austerity through neoliberal policies under the ANC's Reconstruction and Development Program, which was later softened into the even more market friendly gear framework. Multinationals breathed easy, investors returned, and sanctions lifted. South Africa was open for business, but the business was still largely white owned. One could argue Mandela delivered stability for capital rather than justice for labor. Was it prudent? Perhaps. After all, a fragile post apartheid state could hardly risk alienating global finance. But it also meant that the promised rainbow nation leaned on rainbows, not redistribution. His genius was in uniting the country under a narrative of forgiveness, yet his restraint left many wondering if forgiveness became surrender. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission healed wounds symbolically, but materially, apartheid's victims were compensated with stories and not land, not wealth, not structural repair. The result was that Mandela succeeded in preventing civil war, but perhaps at the expense of preventing generational poverty. Still, Mandela's achievements cannot be dismissed. He turned personal suffering into a political weapon, transforming Robben Island from his prison into his pedestal. His charisma disarmed enemies. His speeches inspired generations. And his presence calmed fears of white retribution. For that, South Africa and the world probably owes him recognition. Yet, even in this greatness, confusion still lingers. Was Mandela's reconciliatory posture a tactical necessity or a personal philosophy of restraint? Did he underplay economic justice just because he knew that ANC lacked capacity, or because he believed political equality was victory enough? His paradox is that he was both radical and moderate. The man who took up arms against apartheid but later shook hands with his jailers. History frames this as wisdom, but cynics frame it as a half finished revolution. Liberation leaders rarely get to govern, but Mandela did. But perhaps the weight of governance dulled the fire of revolt. His presidency was not the climax of revolution, but the management of its aftermath, and management, unlike revolt, demands concessions. So, confusion deepens when you consider Mandela's global role. Internationally, he was adored, almost canonized, paraded across capitals as proof that justice could prevail without violence. At home, his aura was a lot more complicated. Many ordinary South Africans adored him, yes, but also began to feel the dissonance between myth and their lived reality. Unemployment remained high, crime soared, and townships swelled with poverty even as the Constitution promised dignity. It was as if Mandela's presidency built a bridge of symbolism without paving the road beneath it. He became a global icon precisely because he offered the world a version of revolution it could digest: nonviolent, forgiving, market friendly. But icons don't govern countries, they inspire them. South Africa needed not just inspiration, but transformation. And in that gap lies the Mandela paradox. His greatness as a global figure may have overshadowed his limitations as a national leader. He carried the flag of hope, but left the ledger of injustice unbalanced. So, who was Nelson Mandela? He was the prisoner who became president, the revolutionary who became a reconciler, the liberator who became the custodian of compromise. He ended apartheid politically, but not economically, leaving Black South Africans free, yet still very vulnerable, enfranchised, yet still dispossessed. Was that his failure or the inevitability of history's weight? Perhaps both. Mandela chose peace over justice, stability over upheaval, symbols over seizures. One could argue he saved the country but secured inequality. Generously, one could argue that he gave South Africa the only chance it had to survive intact. The question still lingers, though, like a shadow. Could he have tried harder, risked more, pushed further? Or is the myth of Mandela always meant to be exactly that? A myth, untouchable, untestable, leaving us confused between gratitude and critique. His paradox remains unresolved because history rarely lets us judge with clarity. What is clear, though, is this: Mandela's light was real, but so were the shadows that it cannot erase.